We continue now at the top of Daf 80b Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 80b. The Gemara here is in the middle of dealing with a contradiction. Let's say you have a child that's born after 8 months. So is that child viable or not? The Brisa over here says, in such a situation, the child is basically not viable, and she should nurse him, mipnei hasakana. The mother should nurse him just because of the danger. Rashi over here says, mipnei hasakana, sakana shneim, they're both in danger. Habein v'ha'am, the child and the mother, shelo yar b'cholav hadadin v'teyanos v'tamas, because if she doesn't nurse him, then the milk can build up within her, and that can be dangerous for her, and she can die. So that's what the Brisa says. But in any case, that Brisa seems to imply the child is not viable. We seem to say before that the child could be viable, and so the Gemara answers Hachav Mayaskin. And here, the case we're dealing with, where we say the child might be viable, is as follows: Kishagamru Simonov. We're talking about a situation when the Simonim, and the Simonim over here we're talking about are the signs of viability. You can see signs of viability on the child. The Tanya, as we learned in a Brisa, Ezeu ben Shmona kol shelo kolulo chadashav. Tanakama says, what's considered a ben Shmona? Any situation where, again, there wasn't a complete 9 months in the womb. Rebbe says, Simonin mochichan olav. You can just look at the signs on the child, and that can prove whether or not the child is a viable baby or not. Saro v'tziparnav shelo gamro. If you see that his hair, you see the fingernails have not completed themselves, then you can see that this child is not viable. And so the Gemara makes the inference, Taima de lo gamru. The only reason you're assuming that the child is not viable is because the simonim have not been clear. Hagamru, but if the simonim are complete, amrinon, so then we say Hai bar zayin, who then we assume this child really is a 7-month baby, which really is viable. Vishtahu yehu. The ishtoi, it just was a delayed in terms of when he came out of the womb, when he was actually born. But the child's a 7-month child, that's perfectly viable. And Rashi over here says Bar Shiva, who again in certain cases when you see the signs, you can assume he's really a 7-month baby. U'leshiva nigmar atzurasu, is fully developed after 7 months. Elashenishta v'chazer, but it just took a little extra time for the child to be born. V'yashmin and Rabbi Avo dafilu l'Rebbe, and then Rabbi Avo's chiddush, that's on the previous summit. His chiddush is that even according to Rebbe, where you have a situation where really we think this child may very well be viable, but we don't say for certain that this individual is viable until he reaches 20 years old. Even in Rebbe's situation where you see the simonim, but it's not until the child is 20 that you really know for certain that it was a viable baby. But the Gemara continues, but what about the situation, the psak halacha that Rava Tosfa issued by a woman whose husband went Lemedinas Hayam? He traveled far away. And it was only 12 months later that she gave birth to a child. So the question was this child in the womb for 12 months and it came from the husband? Or did this woman commit adultery and really this child is from another man? And so Rav Tosfa said, no, it's kosher. It's possible that the pregnancy was delayed. It was a long pregnancy. While Keman, who does that seem to follow? Rebbe. That seems to follow Rebbe. To Amar Mishta, who says there's such a thing as a delay. That's exactly what Rebbe said. Rebbe said you could have a situation where the child was really a 7-month child, but he was born a little late. He was born in the 8th month. So too, it seems like Rav Tosfa was following Rebbe and saying the same thing over here. It took 12 months. It's possible there was a delay. But that's actually problematic because Rebbe's a minority opinion. Why would Rav Tosfa paskin like Rebbe? And so the Gemara answers, Kevan Diko Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel do Amar Mishti, since there's also the Shita of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel who also says this idea that there can be a delay, Kirabim Avad, really he was following a majority. Where do we see this in Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel? The Tanya, because we learned in a Brisa, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Kol Shashah Lamed Yom Ba'adam Eino Nefel. Anytime you see a child that's able to survive for 30 days, when we're talking about humans, so that's not considered a Nefel, that's not considered a situation that is not viable, and therefore the same basic idea. If Shimon Gamliel is going to say, even if it's a situation where there's a baby born after 8 months, you just assume that really it was 7 months and there was a delay, and again, a 7-month baby is viable, and so therefore you have Rabbi Shimon Gamliel agreeing with Rebbe, and that's why Rav Tosfa paskined like that shita. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Ezo Srischama, what's considered a saris, already with natural causes from the time of birth. Kolshu ben esrim v'lohevi shtei saros, anybody who's 20 years old and he doesn't have the 2 hairs, signs of maturity. Ve'afilu hevi le'achar mikan, and even if he brings those signs later on, hareu kesaris l'chol devarav, he's considered a saris for all matters. And we will just note over here that Rashi on the previous summit said that this line over here in the Brisa of Hareo Kesaris L'chol Devarav is going to be a machlokus between Rav and Shmuel, like we said on the previous summit. Is he a Saris Mikanu Lahaba, or does it even mean retroactively we say the individual is a Saris? That was a machlokus, Rav and Shmuel on the previous summit. And the Brisa continues, Ve'elu hein simonav. Now here are the signs that we say that this individual is a saris. Kol she'ein lo zaken, if he doesn't have a beard. V'saro lokai, if there's something wrong with his hair. U'v'saro machlik, and his skin is smooth, he doesn't have hair on his skin, on his body. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Omer Mishum Rav Yehuda ben Yair. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says in the name of Rav Yehuda ben Yair, Kol she'ein meimav malin resichos, anybody who his urine is not going to bring up foam. V'yesh omrim, some people say, Kol hamatil mayim ve'eno sakipa, anybody who urinates and it doesn't make an arch. V'yesh omrim, and some people say, Kol she'shichva zaro doch, anytime you have a situation where the shichva zera, the semen, it doesn't congeal properly. V'yesh omrim, and some people say, Kol she'ein meimei raglav machmitz, and anybody who his urine does not cause fermentation. Acherim omrim, and some people say, Kol she'rochitz b'mos hageshavim, anyone who when he bathes in the rainy season, in the winter season, ve'in besaro mala hevel, and his flesh, his skin, doesn't bring up steam. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Kol shekolo loka, anytime you have a situation where there's something wrong with his voice, ve'in nikr beinish leisha, you can't tell whether he's a man or a woman. And the Brisa continues, Ve'ezuhi islandess, what's considered an islandess? That's again a sexually underdeveloped woman. Kol shi bas esrim v'lo hevia beisaris, any woman who's 20 years old and she doesn't have the two hairs, the two signs of maturity. Ve'afilu hevia la'achar mikan, and even if she brings forth those signs after that, harehi ka'islandess l'chol devaresh, she's considered an islandess. Ve'elu hein simona, and here are the signs of again the signs of an islandess. Kol she'ein lo dadim, if she doesn't have breasts. U'miskasha b'shas tashmish, if relations are painful for her. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Kol she'ein lo shipule me'ayim kinashim, anybody who doesn't have the slope by the area of the abdomen, the way it forms by a regular woman. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Kol shekola ava, anyone who has a thick voice. Ve'ein ani keres beinish lish, and you can't tell whether it's the voice of a woman or the voice of a man. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, we have the following Machlokas Amoraim, Simone Saris, when it comes to the signs of a Saris. Rav Huna Amar Ad Shiyu Kulam. Rav Huna says the person has to have all of these signs. Rav Yochanan says, Afilu Be'echad Mehan, even one of the signs is enough to determine that he's a Saris. And the Gemara continues, Heichad dehevi shtei saros bezaken, in a situation where the person has two hairs on his beard. Now, some people take out the word beard, so it would just mean two hairs, signs of maturity. Kuli alma lo pligi, in a place where the person has these hairs, then there's no disagreement, the ad shiyu kulan, that the person has to have all of the signs in order for it to be determined that he is a saris. Ki pligi b'shalo hevi, the only machlokas is if you have a situation where he doesn't have the shtei saros. So in that situation, there's a machlokas, is one sign going to be enough, or does he need all of the signs? And the Gemara continues, but what about that statement that Rabba bar Avua, he said to the Rabbanon, he said, Ainu baby Rav Nachman, he said, go inspect Rav Nachman. When he goes and he bathes, go see whether his skin brings up the steam. In other words, check to see if he has these signs that maybe he's a saris. But if his skin does bring up steam and he's not a saris, so Esav le bara, so then I'm going to give him my daughter as a wife. And so the Gemara comments, Kiman Rav Huna, who is that following? That seems to follow Rav Huna, because it seems to be saying that a person to be a saris has to have all of the signs, and therefore he wanted to check if even this one sign is missing. If he brings up steam when he takes a bath, so then it's enough to determine he's not a saris, and he wanted him to marry his daughter. And so the Gemara says, Lo no, Rav Nachman sichi dedikna havale. Rav Nachman had the wisps of a beard, he had some hair for a beard, and therefore everybody agrees, not just Rav Huna, everybody agrees in such a situation, a person needs all of the signs, and therefore it was enough to check. If this sign was not present, then that was enough to determine that he could give his daughter to Rav Nachman for a wife. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah towards the end said, Hasaris lo cholitz v'lo miyavim. The saris, again, that's the saris who's a male. He does not do chalitza and yibum. V'chein islandess v'chulu. And similarly, by an islandess, she also, there's no chalitza or yibum. And so the Gemara comments, Kotani saris dumya da islandess. It's teaching us here a case of saris similar to islandess. Ma islandess bidei shamayim, av saris bidei shamayim. Just like an islandess, it's natural causes. So too by the saris, we're talking about a saris of natural causes. And we should note over here that earlier in the Mishnah there was a machlokas tanoim. What kind of saris is the one that doesn't do chalitza and yibum? Is it a saris bidei shamayim, or is it a saris bidei adam? And here at the end of the Mishnah, the Gemara says, Ustama, this stam Mishnah at the end, Rabbi Akiva, seems to be following the position of Rabbi Akiva, to Amar bidei adam in, because Rabbi Akiva is the one that says that a saris bidei adam, in that case, yes, chalitza is done, bidei shamayim lo, but if it's a saris bidei shamayim, there's no chalitza and there's no yibum. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hasaris shechalatz liyevemto lo pasel. If the saris does chalitza with the yevama, doesn't pasel her because it's not considered a real chalitza. But then the Mishnah goes on to say that if he has relations with her, that does pasel her from a kohen, because in that situation, there's not supposed to be yibum. Rather, what that's considered is a situation of eishesach. Since it's not a situation where there's yibum because he's a saris, so then she's asert him at a level of kares, and therefore she's going to be, again, psula to kahuna. And the Gemara says, Taima de Ba'alahu, the only reason why she's psula is because he has relations with her. Ha'acher lo, but it seems like if someone else has relations with her, it would not be the same problem. As Rashi over here says, Taima de Ba'alahu, de have a zona, in that case she's a zona, de nivala la'ache bala shelo b'malka mitzvah, because she's had relations with the brother of her husband, and it's not a situation of a mitzvah, it's not a situation of yibum. V'ya isala b'kares, and it's a situation, again, where there's a punishment of kares, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Aleph Amud Aleph.